We've got breaking news in the NFL where the Carolina Panthers are planning to hire Dave Canales as their new head coach. That's the latest from our Jonathan Jones. The 42-year-old Canales spent the 2023 season as the offensive coordinator in Tampa Bay, working with Baker Mayfield as they won the NFC South. Now, prior to that, he spent more than a decade as an assistant with the Seahawks. Now he'll get a chance to work with Bryce Young, who struggled as a rookie as the Panthers finished 2-15 with Frank Reich getting fired after week 12. Our Pete Prisco joining us now with this breaking news as the Carolina Panthers are planning to hire Dave Canales as their new head coach. You had some time that you spent with him. What's your initial reaction to this hire?
Well, he's an impressive coach, no question about it. Impressive offensive coach. I think he understands offensive football. It's amazing, though, when you look at his career. About 15 years ago, he was coaching high school football. A year after that, he was at a community college. Pete Carroll met him, brought him in, was impressed with him, brought him in as the strength coach at USC, and then he followed him to Seattle. So, again, it's a lot of who you know. Dan Morgan happened to be one of the guys in that Seattle front office, and that's where there's a relationship.
I was going to ask about that connection. It seems like it's such a small world when it comes to coaching in general. So break down that relationship for us.
Well, again, he was in the front office and he was on the staff, so they obviously spent time together. They were both young. Dan Morgan had played, and so he had just come off his career. So obviously they were young coaches. One was a young coach, one was a young personnel guy, and you kind of bonded together. And that's what this league becomes sometimes. It's about relationships, and you know, it's not what you know sometimes. It's who you know. It doesn't mean that Dave Canales and Dan Morgan can't be good together, but they did know each other, and that's something that bonded them and probably had a big influence on why he got the job.
I got to ask you about a tweet that you put out August 5th, 2023. Tampa Bay offensive coordinator Dave Canales is an impressive young coach. He is so upbeat and players really like his system. But like I told some Bucs personnel, he's almost too upbeat at times. Maybe it's just me being a crusty dude.
Well,
are you just being a crusty dude, or do you think, how does that fit with the head coaching role now?
I think it's okay to be that way. Sometimes, though, when you see somebody like that, yeah, I mean, you have to temper it a little bit. There's going to be days in the NFL where you're not upbeat. You got to come in there and face the music, and I think that's something that he probably had to learn this year as an offensive coordinator when Baker Mayfield struggled at times, and he did a great job with Baker Mayfield, don't get me wrong, but you have to have, you can't be all the time up here. There's going to be highs and lows, and you have to be somewhere in between. And that's what my concern was. But obviously he navigated this season. And yes, I'm a crusty guy, so
you are a crusty old man.
I am, and I'll look through the happiness to find the misery.
Don't do that. That's not what life's about. All right, when we look at Dave Canales and what he was able to do with a player like Baker Mayfield, really revive his career, what can he do for Bryce Young? Because clearly he's needing some help.
Well, Geno Smith, too. Remember, he also helped resurrect his career and as the quarterback's coach, and when he was the offensive coordinator, did a great job with Baker Mayfield. The problem with Bryce Young is he can't make him grow. That's the problem. And Bryce Young is 5'9", and I think that showed up in a big way last year. So there is concerns about that. I had concerns about it when he came into the league. I thought he was too small. He was going to have problems, and he had problems because of how small and how his height. And so they have to get creative with him. What are you going to do to make him a better player? And I think that's where Dave Canales can be effective, is getting him outside the pocket, not keeping him in there, getting him on bootlegs, and that kind of thing. I think that's how they'll make him a better quarterback.
You mentioned Geno Smith there. We obviously saw Baker Mayfield. What can he do to quarterbacks to kind of change their careers? What is it about his offensive mastermind that helps with that?
Well, I think it's the relationship helps. And when we were there in May and in the summer, one of the things we talked with Baker about his relationship with him, and he liked it. He liked the guy. And sometimes you have to like the guy you work with, and you have to trust the guy you work with. The relationship between offensive coordinator, head coach, who's an offensive guy, and the quarterback is such an important part of the team. If you don't get along with him, if you bristle at his criticism, if he's not the guy you can get along with, I think that kind of bleeds over into your offense. And I don't think Canales is that kind of guy. I think he's going to be positive and upbeat, like I said, which I think, you know, Bryce Young, Baker Mayfield took to it. Bryce Young will probably take to it as well. It's just a matter of crafting the right offense for that guy. A lot of coaches take a job and they say, this is my system. You're going to fit into my system. I think think a smart young coach like Dave Canales will be wise enough to say, no, I'm going to fit my system to what my quarterback can do, and I think he'll adjust a little bit to what Bryce Young does and make him a better quarterback. He will make him a better quarterback. It's just how much of a better quarterback can he be?
So you look at the Carolina Panthers as a whole now, a 2-15 season that we just finished up. How short is his leash? We know Tepper's quick to pull a trigger.
Yeah, but he keeps saying he wants that long-term guy there, and at some point you have to stop firing and hiring coaches. It's a problem, and you know, for Tepper, it's not as much of a problem because he has so much money, so he can just keep doling it out. But it's not a good look for the franchise. You know, you want continuity, you want consistency, and I think that's a problem. So I hope he's. I mean, for the sake of the franchise, you'd like to think he's going to be there for a long time. But again, we know patience is not a part of this NFL anymore. It's even worse than it's ever been. We see coaches like Nick Sirianni go to the Super Bowl one year and have his job being threatened or possibly on the line the next year. There is no more patience in the NFL. So I'm not going to sit here and say this guy's going to be there 5 years from now. You hope he is for the sake of him and the Panthers organization, but I can't sit here and say. That's why, you know, every coach that gets hired, everything you see, great, 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 great. He's going to be a great coach. They're not all great. We know that. There's going to be a lot of failures. It's a hard job. It's a tough job, and not everybody fits into that mold of being a head coach. Just because you're a good offensive coordinator does not necessarily mean you're going to be a good head coach.
That is fair. But speaking of a good head coach that I think we can all agree on, there's still a name, excuse me, a name out there that has been floating around, and we're still trying to see where he may land, and that is Bill Belichick. So now there are 3 coaching positions available. He has been tied to the Atlanta Falcons. Where does Belichick land as this list is dwindling down?
Well, yeah, because I think Ben Johnson is going to be the coach of the Commanders. I think that's, you know, that's a pretty much a not very well-kept secret. I think he will be the coach of the Commanders. And then you look at the Seahawks, and that doesn't seem like a direction they would go, to go from a 71-year-old coach to another guy who's in his 70. That doesn't make sense as well. So it looks like it's Atlanta or nothing. And he's had 2 interviews with them and hasn't been hired.
What's the holdup? I
think, you know, Rich McKay is in that building. He's been around, and, you know, maybe there's a little bit of Belichick wants to come in and say it's my way or the highway, and they say no. And there's a little pushback from that. So I understand it. Bill Belichick doesn't have to coach. I think he wants to coach in large part because I think he wants to break Don Shula's record. And so what happens when he breaks the record? Is he still there? Is he just coaching to break the record, or is he coaching for the next 5 years? And can you give a commitment for 5 years? I think those things are all in play. Coaching-wise, he's the best candidate, no doubt about it. The guy has won Super Bowls. He's a fantastic coach. But when you put into play and into the equation him, the general manager, if he wants that power, or how long will he be there, the question you have to ask if you're Arthur Blank or any other owner, is he worth it? And that's why I think there's been a little bit of a pullback on that.
Well, the Carolina Panthers sure think that Dave Canales is worth it, as he is planning to be named as their next head coach. Pete Prisco joining us here on CBS Sports HQ. So we take a look at this coaching carousel, another one ticked off the list here. Dave Canales, the new head coach, potentially planning to be named. Don't want to throw it out there until it's official. But Dave Canales is supposed to be named as the next head coach of the Carolina Panthers. We're still waiting on the Seahawks, the Falcons, and the Commanders as the coaching carousel goes round and around.